A startling racist and homophobic attack, which turned out to be a hoax, made headlines across the nation. But years later, a stunning ruling is made which overturned an actor's conviction for his role in the hoax. Jussie Smollett, who is best known for his role on the hit Fox show Empire, was found guilty in 2021 for the attack hoax and lying to police. But his lawyers say the conviction violated his Fifth Amendment rights after Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx had already agreed to drop the charges against the actor if he paid the $10,000 bond and completed community service. So he did that, and the initial 16 disorderly conduct charges were dropped in March of 2019.
First of all, I want to thank my family, my friends, the incredible people of Chicago, and all over the country and the world who have prayed for me, who have supported me, who have shown me so much love. No one will ever know how much that has meant to me, and I will forever be grateful. I want you to know that not for a moment was it in vain. I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I would be accused of. This has been an incredibly difficult time, honestly one of the worst of my entire life. But I am a man of faith, and I'm a man that has knowledge of my history, and I would not bring my family, our lives, or the movement through a fire like this. I just wouldn't. So I want to thank my legal counsel from the bottom of my heart. And I would also like to thank the state of Illinois for attempting to do what's right. Now I'd like nothing more than to just get back to work and move on with my life. But make no mistakes, I will always continue to fight for the justice, equality, and betterment of marginalized people everywhere. So again, thank you for all the support, thank you for faith, and thank you to God. Bless y'all. Thank you.
The decision to drop the charges was met with backlash, including from then Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
This is a whitewash of justice. A grand jury could not have been clearer. To then say not only is the cost, $10,000 doesn't come cost financially, but all the other repercussions of this decision it made, to me, where is the accountability in the system? You cannot have, because of a person's position, one set of rules apply to them, and another set of rules apply to everybody else. In another way, you're seeing this play out in the universities, where people pay extra to get their kids a special position in universities. Now you have a person, because of their position and background, who's getting treated in a way that nobody else would ever, sorry about that, don't get near, I'm doing near my sermon here, that would ever get close to this type of treatment. Our officers did hard work, day in and day out, countless hours, working to unwind what actually happened that night. The city saw its reputation dragged through the mud, but I remind everybody it was not just the officers' work. That work, a piece of that work, was shown to a grand jury, and they made a decision based on only a sliver of the evidence. And as I remember correctly, somebody wanted to have that evidence in the day, as the superintendent said, their day in court, so all the evidence could be made public.
But just months later, a special prosecutor was brought in because Fox recused herself from the case, and a grand jury restored the charges, which led to his trial. During his trial, two brothers who Smollett knew from the show Empire testified Smollett paid them $3,500 to carry out the attack. Prosecutors said Smollett, who is openly gay, told them to shout out racist and homophobic slurs. Meanwhile, Smollett has maintained the attack wasn't a hoax and said he was the victim of a hate crime. However, he was convicted by a jury on 5 counts of disorderly conduct. He was sentenced to 150 days in jail, but he only served 6 and was freed pending appeal. Then in December of last year, an appeals court upheld his conviction. Smollett's team challenged many aspects of the case, including the role of the special prosecutor, jury selection, and evidence. Since Smollett has long maintained the hate crime was real and not a hoax, his team pushed for his conviction to be thrown out. And back in December, in a 2-1 decision, the district appellate court declared no one promised Smollett he wouldn't face a new prosecution after accepting the original deal. However, Justice Fredrena Lyle dissented and called the refiled charges fundamentally unfair. But Smollett's lawyers said they'll take the case to the Illinois Supreme Court. And in March of this year, the Illinois Supreme Court accepted to hear the appeal. Fast forward months later, on Thursday, the Illinois Supreme Court overturned Smollett's conviction. They made the ruling on the basis the special prosecutor shouldn't have been allowed to intervene when Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx initially dropped the charges against Smollett in exchange for him forfeiting his $10,000 bond and doing community service. According to the ruling, Smollett performed his part of the bargain, and the second prosecution under the circumstances is a due process violation. The ruling even cited disgraced comedian Bill Cosby's case, writing, quote, "Clearly the state reneging on a fully executed agreement after defendant has forfeited a $10,000 bond and reliance on the agreement would be arbitrary, unreasonable, fundamentally unfair, and a violation of the defendant's due process rights. See Commonwealth v. Cosby." To allow the government to receive the benefit of its bargain without providing the reciprocal benefit contracted for by the defendant would do more than violate the private contractual rights of the parties. It would offend all notions of fairness in the related criminal proceedings, which are protected by constitutional due process. The 32-page ruling concludes with, "We are aware that this case has generated significant public interest and that many people were dissatisfied with the resolution of the original case and believed it to be unjust. Nevertheless, what would be more unjust than the resolution of any one criminal case would be a holding from this court that the state was not bound to honor agreements upon which people have detrimentally relied." The ruling further cites the Bill Cosby case, writing, quote, "As the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania recently stated when enforcing a prosecutorial promise not to prosecute, it cannot be gainsaid that society holds a strong interest in the prosecution of crimes. It is also true that no such interest in ensuring that the constitutional rights of the people are vindicated. Society's interest in prosecution does not displace the remedy due to constitutionally aggrieved persons." After the ruling, Smollett's attorneys released a statement saying, quote, "This was not a prosecution based on facts. Rather, it was a vindication persecution, and such a proceedings has no place in our criminal justice system." Meanwhile, the special prosecutor, Dan Webb, said he disagreed with the court's ruling, writing, quote, "The Illinois Supreme Court did not find any error with the overwhelming evidence presented at trial that Mr. Smollett orchestrated a fake hate crime and reported it to the Chicago Police Department as a real hate crime, or the jury's unanimous verdict that Mr. Smollett was guilty of 5 counts of felony disorderly conduct." And with this stunning ruling made in the Jussie Smollett case, let's break down this further with trial attorney Andrew Scott. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, you're in the Chicago area. Talk to me a little bit about your reaction to this ruling, and did it come as a surprise to you at all?
It was a shock to hear Jussie's name again. And yeah, the ruling is surprising to me to a certain extent. I'm more surprised that this story is still going on.
And that's true, because the whole ruling is really kind of based on this agreement between Smollett and the Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx. Why do you think that the case even went to trial, given the two had already made this deal?
Well, and that's a great question. And that's why I don't think this Supreme Court ruling is wrong. In fact, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with it because they don't like Jussie and what happened with Jussie. But I think the Supreme Court got the right thing here, because you don't want the government, you don't want the prosecutors making agreements and then being able to go back on those agreements and re-prosecute people. And that was my immediate reaction when this happened originally. I said, that doesn't sound right to me. And now that it's been sort of reversed, I can't say anything wrong with this. I know it's going to be a popular source of people to be mad about because this was such a huge story here, but the court got it right here.
And in the ruling, it was interesting to see that they cited the Cosby case. So what do you think about the Illinois Supreme Court using Cosby's dismissal in the Smollett ruling, specifically when it comes to them pointing out the Pennsylvania Supreme Court stating, quote, "It cannot be gainsaid that society holds a strong interest in the prosecution of crimes. It is also true that no such interest, however important, ever can eclipse society's interest in ensuring that the constitutional rights of people are vindicated. Society's interest in prosecution does not displace the remedy due to constitutionally aggrieved persons." What do you kind of make of that conclusion of it all?
Well, first I had to look up the word gainsaid because that was a new one to me. But this is such a weird case, such a weird situation. It became sort of almost like a pet prosecution. And then what happened was the court found itself in a situation that there was no precedent to use. So What the court does then is they find persuasive precedent. They found the recent Pennsylvania case with Bill Cosby to be the, on point, have the facts on point, and they found that to be the persuasive case to make this ruling. I'm not necessarily surprised that that's how they had to go because, again, this was the type of situation. It was so weird. This was the type of prosecution that was so strange, and everybody sort of looked at this like, okay, well, we didn't like the guy, but he went to jail. But that's the thing that kind of blows my mind here is he already did his jail time. So this is just sort of like crossing something off on the record. And so the damage is done here. So I'm interested to see what his next move is. Is he going to sue? Is he going to do? If I'm him, I would just go away.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see how that all plays out. Kind of going back to the case overall, I personally remember when it unfolded, and Smollett has long maintained that this was real and it wasn't a hoax. What do you think about the whole overall aspect of the case? One being that Smollett has maintained that this wasn't a hoax, but also then you have this added layer of the brothers who were these extras on the set of Empire saying, no, he paid us to do this. What do you think about the case overall and just Smollett maintaining that innocence, but also the brothers saying that they did this because Smollett paid them?
Yeah, I remember when the case happened too. And I remember that it was one of those weird parts of Chicago winter where nothing else was going on. So this was like the top story for like 2 weeks after the weather. And I remember the whole time just hearing about it over and over and over. And my reaction was, I'm tired of hearing about this case, and I understand he has a right to not incriminate himself. I think the evidence against him was very damning, and I think that's why he was eventually convicted. I think it's very likely that this was probably a hoax. But at the end of the day, if the press didn't get so involved in this case, and this wasn't such a case that people were so passionate about based on all the surrounding and political circumstances, he never would have been prosecuted in the first place, first of all, most likely. And second of all, he certainly wouldn't have been brought back in and had these charges re-brought against him.
And are you surprised there were only disorderly conduct charges?
It seemed what would be a normal type of charge in this type of situation. He's not a career or habitual offender by any circumstances. He appears to do a lot of good work with the community, and generally how these prosecutors work is they you get indicted on something, and then they eventually move your charges to something less severe, and then you just sort of usually get probation or whatever, and you just sort of move on with your life. You kind of get your little one get out of jail free card on these sort of cases and hope that you sort of, it makes a change. And I can guarantee you that Jussie was never going to do this again, I would hope. But
yeah, that's right. And talk to me also a little bit, because you had mentioned earlier just the mood in Chicago when this had all unfolded. Was it that people were mad at him? Was it that they were mad at the prosecutor or the prosecution's office? Like, what was kind of the mood in Chicago? Was it just kind of also divided 50-50?
I would say at first people were sort of surprised but sort of skeptical when this was first reported, because I'm telling you, that week when this happened, it was negative 20 degrees, not wind chill, like straight up freeze outside. Like, it was so cold that week that you step outside, you couldn't be outside for very long. And so when this happened, everyone was like, okay, this is sort of a weird thing, and if that happened, that's terrible. And then the press started keep digging into it, and stuff started sort of unraveling, and you got to sort of see in live time as his story sort of unraveled, and people got really mad at Jussie about it. And then people really wanted, a prosecution here. People really wanted him to have consequences. When Kim Foxx announced the charges that were going to go against him, people were happy. And then when people found out that they had, agreed to dismiss those charges, people were enraged. So it went from people being mad at Jussie to people being mad at Jussie and Kim Foxx and the Cook County State's attorney. And I honestly feel like this case is one of the reasons why Kim Foxx, her is so poorly regarded in Illinois, especially in the Chicago area. Maybe not necessarily in the city of Chicago, but elsewhere, people have a very low opinion of her, and I think it's mostly because of this case.
Yeah, and we were talking also a little bit about whether or not Jussie can kind of where he'll go next from here. In your opinion, do you think that he can get back ever to what he once was? He was this rising star on Empire. He had a thriving career ahead of him. This happened, completely tanked his career. I think a lot of people kind of even in Hollywood wanted to stay away from him at this time. But do you think he can ever kind of go back to what he once was?
I hope so. I like redemption stories, and he has a great opportunity for a redemption story here, and I hope we see that from him, because it would teach people a lot to see him, have this happen. He probably first needs to be accountable for it, and if he's accountable and he has his redemption story, he comes back. I had never watched, or I should say I had seen his show, but I had never really thought about him before this occurred. His character just didn't really stick out much to me, but he has the talent. I hope that he finds a way to make peace with himself, make peace with society, and come back. I would like that redemption story.
Yeah, we love a good comeback story, definitely, for sure. I want to thank you so much, Andrew, for spending your time and discussing this case with me, especially this very stunning ruling that happened just on a Thursday. Thank you again so much. Before we sign you off, though, is there anything else about this case overall that you'd like to add?
Like I said, I was shocked to hear from it again, because I got to tell you, this case was front of headlines for 6 months in Chicago. It was every day hearing about this case. And I remember at some point being like, I just don't want to hear about Jussie Smollett anymore. And I managed to forget about him. And then I saw this ruling today. So.
All right. Again, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
According to reports, Dan Webb, the special prosecutor on the case, said Chicago officials can still pursue their civil case against Smollett that is seeking to get back the $130,000, which is the amount police say they paid in overtime to pursue Smollett's accusations. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.